Morning, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes to let people turn up. So it should be about 1 or 2 minutes before we get started. For what it's worth, for those who have just joined, you should be able to put through questions and answers during the session as well, and they will pop up here in front of me. So I'll be able to see them and answer them as we go. Okay, I'm going to get started. So during this presentation, there are not too many attendees, which is fine. But if you want to ask questions as we go along, I should be able to take them as we go. We can make it a little bit more interactive. So feel free to raise your hand or put a question through, and we'll answer the questions as we go. Good morning, everybody. My name is Gerard Keohane. I run Studio 49. We've been involved in web development since 2006 and in e-commerce since 2008. I've been involved in a leadership capacity in hundreds of builds, rebuilds, replatforming projects, etc. over the past 15 years or more. In Studio 49, I'm a consultant and business analyst, and in rebuild projects, my responsibility is the initial discovery phase, and I lead the team here that completes the scope of work for everything from custom user experience journeys to integrations to data transformations and custom automations. Today, the agenda is go through the introduction. We're going to talk about assessing business needs. We're going to talk about preserving current data, processes, and functionality, balancing the goals of the rebuild with the new technology. We're going to talk a little bit about timelines, resources, and launch, and then we're going to take some questions. So to get started, I suppose we're just going to have a quick chat about what kind of projects we're actually talking about here. I have a poll that I'm going to launch, and basically what I'm looking to know is, for those of you who are looking at a rebuild or a migration, which platforms are you currently on? And so I'm going to give that a couple of minutes. So the sorts of projects we're talking about today are rebuild projects. So those are kind of replatforms or migrations usually. That said, a lot of what we discuss will be applicable to new builds. In fact, in many ways, a replatform is just a much larger and often far more risky version of a rebuild. But for clarity, we're going to be talking about projects where you've been up and running as a business for several years, and you now want to move from your existing platform. For example, you may want to migrate from Magento or WooCommerce and move to Shopify. In some cases, you may be on a platform that you like, but you need to rebuild or redesign. And if so, some of this will apply to you too. For transparency, most of the projects that Studio 49 now work on are migrations from a platform like Magento or WooCommerce to Shopify. And just to give you some figures on that, we've launched since 2020. So in the last 2.5 years or so, we've launched 62 e-commerce sites. Of those, 40 have been rebuild or migration projects. The types of migrations that we usually do would be from Magento, Shopware, WooCommerce, some BigCommerce, and then occasionally there are other platforms out there that that people are on, sometimes custom platforms, etc. So from what I can see here, we've got a couple of people on WooCommerce and most of the rest of the people are on Shopify. So I'm just going to end that poll. So Just as a final figure there, the number of sites that involved an integration to an EPOS or an ERP was 36. So like a lot of what we talk about, or what we'll be talking about today, will involve things like preserving current functionality and processes that you'll want to implement on your new e-commerce site. And the biggest part of that is typically the ERP or EPOS integration. So assessing business needs and e-commerce platform. So the first thing, I guess, is before migrating or upgrading your e-commerce platform, it's important to clearly define your business goals and objectives. This helps you choose the right platform and feature set that aligns with your business needs, and it ensures that your new platform is optimized for achieving your goals. It's important to have a frank conversation about why you want to move and communicate that in your request for proposal so that everyone is on the same page regarding why you're migrating. You would be surprised how many times people are just kind of migrating, but haven't really, let's say, just put down on one paragraph, we're migrating because we feel like our customer experience is outdated and we need to dramatically improve it, and we want to integrate with our new ERP, for example. So even having a couple of those goals and objectives listed right at the front will keep everybody's mind on what the prize is during the migration process, because it's very easy to get distracted over the course of the migration process. Some of the general reasons for moving are the age of your existing platform, an ambition to significantly improve customer experience and features. Maybe on some platforms that you might be on, security has become an issue, or the infrastructure is and hosting requirements and the obligation on you to manage that is becoming a concern. Or you might have continuous upgrades, which cost you quite a bit of money, and every year you're running through an upgrade process that kind of soaks up a lot of your time. Also, scalability and agility of the existing platform. Can your platform exist to growing traffic that you now have? Or the cost of the existing platform might be higher than you like, especially the operating costs when it comes to supporting and maintaining the platform. And then you might look for new functionality or features that are not readily available on your existing platform. So understanding why from a business perspective you're deciding to move platform and communicating this is critical to the success of the project, and outlining that in a short paragraph is really, really useful. So the customer experience, that's probably one of the first kind of most front-facing parts of your e-commerce site. It's the part that people are most often able to criticize, complain about, both externally and internally. The table stakes, the pure hygiene factor in terms of the new platform is that it should be easy to navigate and provide seamless checkout and be optimized for mobile devices. So these are things that are just, they should be there in this day and age. You should also consider features such as personalization, product recommendation, customer service options, which will allow you to enhance the customer experience. But the general areas that are up for review are search and merchandising, filtering and navigation, improvements to site speed, improvements to conversion rate, options for improving average order value via product recommendations or cross-sells, and then tracking, segmenting, and reporting on customers for improved customer lifetime value analysis. This, the list of things that you might want to achieve can be done by analyzing data from your current platform to identify any performance issues, such as slow load times or checkout errors. And then tools like Hotjar that we're all quite familiar with, or video user experience testing, so recording people using your website, are useful to generate areas for improvement. You should also review customer feedback and complaints, check out what people are saying about you on Trustpilot, or even consider launching a customer survey to collect additional feedback and perhaps even ask your customers what they see as best in class. And from that, you can generate a list of areas in customer experience that might be key features that you want to include in your new platform. Having said that, it is a valid question to decide between a redesign or a lift and shift. So the redesign process takes time. It's also one of the areas that is a stumbling block in terms of the timeline of the actual overall project, because everybody kind of has an opinion on the design, everybody has an opinion on the layout and what they expect the site should do, and iterating through a new design and getting feedback and getting sign-off can take a lot of time. Sometimes you're happy with your existing design. So, it might be the case that you would consider a lift and shift instead. To be honest, I'm all up for a redesign. You now have a lot of experience under your belt, and you should be able to speak to how your customers use the site, what their problems are, how they buy online, what products and categories they buy most of, and how you can promote and improve customer purchase journeys. You might be thinking about bundling, or you might be thinking about tiered pricing. You might have a couple of features that you think would really improve and accelerate the sales made on your website. But, if you're happy with the design, a lift and shift is completely doable. And that's basically taking your existing design and applying it to the new website. Having said that, over the last 2.5 years, we've only completed about 2 lift and shifts. And in both cases, it is worth saying that the timeline for the project was much shorter than normal. When you've got a lift and shift, there seems to be a tendency for the business, the wider business, to kind of let the e-commerce team just get on with things, especially when there's no design to critique or input feedback for. Targets and benchmarks, again, just like the importance of outlining your objective, we'll say in a paragraph, it's also important to make your targets known. There's no reason to be coy about it. And when you're communicating those targets to your agency, or even during the sales process, in your RFP, you can your request for a proposal or a price from the agencies that you're considering moving to. There's no harm in being clear on the targets you're hoping to achieve and when you want to meet them. So some simple KPI-based targets would be a 10% increase in conversion rate after launch, measured 3 months after go live year on year, a 10% increase in average order value, an annualized revenue of 3 million by the end of 2024, or a 2-second page load time, or you might have a specific Google page speed insights figure that you're trying to hit. So in those cases, I would be clear about them up front, and I would even ask the people that you're talking to give you an idea of why they think that there's going to be a 10% increase in conversion rate. I mean, that's your target, but how are you going to achieve that? So ensure that you've benchmarked your existing KPIs. I guess that's quite important. So understand what your existing KPIs are for the last year or two, and share those statistics during the sales journey to be sure everybody's on the same page regarding the criteria for success for replatforming. This is what you're going to evaluate the project on later on. Now we're going to talk about preserving current data, processes, and critical functionality. So in terms of the first area is catalog and data migration. Anybody who's undertaken an e-commerce project, let's say for the first time, probably has the scars around the catalog. The catalog is one of the most time-consuming and sometimes the hardest area to get right, especially if your catalog is all buried in an existing ePOS system, where you've got names and titles and descriptions on the product that only make sense to your business. You mightn't have any kind of attributes for the product readily available. Sometimes the products don't even have a kind of a product hierarchy where the SKUs are associated with each other, so that you can easily identify which are the color variants and the size variants of a given product. So there's quite a lot of work in day one in setting up your catalog. And no less so, there's quite a lot of work in migrating your data from your existing platform. Most of the data that you have on your existing platform, you'll probably want to keep, but some of it you should also consider getting rid of. The data migration will be a critical aspect of migrating and upgrading your e-commerce platform. For me, it is one of the core risks in a project. So if you're calling out the risks of a project, data migration is a core risk, or is a key risk, and integrations and testing is a key risk. So you should have a plan in place for migrating all of your existing data, including your customer data, your product data, your order history, and any other important information. You should also ensure that your new platform is capable of handling the existing data volumes, and that your data is properly formatted and compatible with the new platform. That's not always going to be the case. The data that you're going to bring with you, or that you're going to consider bringing with you, are customers. And it's worth noting that generally passwords can't be migrated, so you need to think about how you're going to handle that. orders. And one of the reasons I would consider bringing orders, even if you have them in an ePOS or ERP, is because it allows you to do year-on-year reporting within your new platform normally. Products, categories, pages, and blog posts. So some of these, all of these you'll want to migrate. Some of them you're going to leave a lot of data behind. Some of these can be migrated or handled automatically. And you'll have to work with your agency to figure out which of these you can do. With respect to the order history, from a business perspective, you should preserve 7 years of order history somewhere in your business. If you have that data elsewhere, for example, in your ERP, then you can decide to bring less data with you when you migrate. However, having the data is useful for both your customers who may wish to see their order history and for reporting purposes, as I mentioned, so that you can do year-on-year reporting in your new platform. Also, that kind of data is going to be useful for customer segmentation and lifetime value analysis. If you want to find out which customers are buying from which specific parts of your catalog, how often they buy, whether they've been coming back. And if you want to do that kind of reporting in your new platform, it's important for you to have the customer data and the order data migrated over. With respect to products and categories, it's particularly important to understand any special attributes that you created over time that you've come to rely on. It's very common to create an attribute in your existing platform and forget about how important it is. So, for example, you might have an attribute like bulky item, which indicates to the tool that's calculating your shipping fees that this item has to have an additional charge. Sometimes you might have a display-only attribute where the product cannot be bought online and it's only there for display. Sometimes you'll have compliance, for example, do not discount on baby food, things like that. So it'll be important to review all of the attributes that you have on your products and decide how you're going to migrate those over to the new platform. And in particular, identify where there's functionality tied to those attributes that you will need ported over to the new platform. So for display only, for example, when you identify that a product is display only on the front end, we remove the add to cart button. You need to make sure that you keep that. And it takes an exercise to go back through your product data and to identify those key parts of the data that actually have functionality attached to them. In terms of gotchas when formatting data for the new platform, it's unlikely that the data in one platform is going to be an exact match for the data in the new platform. For example, product attributes and attribute sets in Magento are likely to need to become product tags in Shopify. So there isn't a direct matching or mapping that you can make. So you're going to have to make a decision about how you're going to bring that information over. It's worth running an exercise to know how to map data in one place to data in another. Ultimately, your agency will need to help you with this work, and it's important to account for it in your project planning. And just as a gotcha, for example, one of the issues we've run into most frequently are addresses. The address format in one system is not always the same as the address format in another. And what is required in one system, for example, counties or postcodes, may not be required, or they may not be required in one system, but they may be required in the new system. They not only might they be required, but they might also be validated. So, having co.cork instead of County Cork or Cork as a county and so on may cause problems in your new system. And in the address, for example, if you've got problems there, you're going to have problems for the existing customers who are trying to check out using their migrated addresses. So it's important to keep an eye on the gotchas that you're likely to have when it comes to formatting the data for your for migration. Also, a good point is to clean up before you move on. So it's a great time to do a bit of spring cleaning. Not everything you have in the old platform is worth bringing with you. Sometimes you're experimenting with features or you're trying things out, and you might end up with pretty much kind of a lot of crud in the old platform, and you don't want to bring that with you. As a business, it would be worth completing an exercise to clean up your data in the old system before you migrate, so you don't transfer bad or needless data to the new system. In particular, you might turn off old products which you might have been keeping on for, let's say, to have kind of redirects in place or something like that for products that went out of stock. those products could be years and years old now. It could be time to get rid of them. You look at duplicate or outdated data. So old orders and customers that are no longer required. Maybe you'll take a view that you don't actually need anything that's any orders that are greater than 3 years old. Old products that are out of stock or obsolete. A lot of products go obsolete, or they might have been seasonal. You might have kept them on the site in the expectation that they'll come back the following year, and they didn't. So now is the time to get rid of those. Old product attributes that are not used. In particular, when you're looking at systems like Magento, it's very common to have huge attribute sets, often in one default attribute set, so huge groups of attributes. Some of which you won't even remember, the purpose of. So it's worth a review of those and see whether or not you need them, and maybe get rid of them before you migrate. And also, it's an opportunity to review all policy and content pages to ensure they're up to date and correct. It's very easy to get out of date with your delivery and returns policies or your terms and conditions and so on as things change over the year. So now is an opportunity for you to review those. I guess in an area that is going to be this area is going to take you a lot of work. So from a resourcing point of view, you're the only person who knows your data. You're going to have to clean it up. But also from the point of view that certain things won't be automatically transferable. So there's only products and categories, customers and orders. You'll probably be able to do a lot of automatic work with, but things like content pages, you're probably going to have to migrate by hand. And so it's worth having a review of all of those. And on that point, the non-e-commerce pages, things like delivery policies, terms and conditions about us, basically everything in the footer. When you're focused on a rebuild project, it's very easy to get focused on, for obvious reasons, on orders and products and categories and so on. And it's easy to forget about the things that you have buried in the footer that sometimes you haven't looked at in a while. In particular, be careful with pages with functionality. So your store locator, your contact us page, your careers pages, your make an appointment. It can be easy enough to forget about those. I mean, no e-commerce platform comes with a built-in store locator. Most of them don't come with built-in forms. So, you might get one contact form, for example, but it's rare to have a form that you might use for accepting applications for jobs and things like that. So it's quite important to make sure that you highlight those pages and make a list of those pages that you want to migrate to your new platform also. Current processes and customizations. So the name of the game here is to avoid a situation where you or someone in your business uses the words, but our old platform did X, or Y was better in our old site. When I hear that, I know that there's been a failure in the migration process or in the rebuild processes. And, we deal with a lot of companies who have rebuilt or moved EPOS and ERP system or e-commerce sites or whatever. We're very, very used to hearing that. The name of the game in terms of the migration is to never hear that again. And in order to do that, what you have to do really is identify all of your critical functionality, and document them and identify what they do, if possible, screencast them. So, the critical functionality that you might have, like order processing, inventory, etc., they must be protected during the platform migration. Anything that goes wrong with those, like even small difficulties with inventory after you launch, especially if you launch towards a busy period, can cause an enormous panic after the site is launched. So you want to really make sure that you've identified what they do and enabled as thorough a testing as you can possibly have. So my suggestion here in terms of it would be to have a short description. It doesn't need to be, incredibly detailed. Identify the functionality. What does it do? Make a step-by-step journey and screencast. So the kinds of things that you'll want to look for are your payment processing. And don't forget, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but don't forget that, there's other people involved, like the accountants who have to reconcile the funds, the financial officers who are going to be worried about the cash flow and how many days it's going to take for the cash to hit your bank account and things like that. So look at your payment processing, look at your order fulfillment, your inventory management, your click and collect journeys, your product creation, merchandising, and refunds and returns. So those are some areas that you'd want to look at, and to identify how you currently handle all of those things, so that there's nobody, there's nobody in accounts who suddenly says, wait a minute, in the old system we used to have this reconciliation report, or we used to have a VAT report by country, that sort of thing. So you want to get all of that information. The step-by-step journey can be used as well to complete user acceptance testing at a later point in the project. And the easiest way to describe what something does is to go through it step by step. So even if you don't have the ability to do this, you should ensure that this work is completed with you during the discovery phase by your new agency. So like an example journey here is customer adds to cart and pays. Important thing here is, let's say, pays, so you know that the funds are now have now been taken. When the payment is complete and the order can be transferred to the ERP, the middleware collects the order from e-commerce and prepares the files for the ERP. The middleware posts the customer data to the ERP first to create or retrieve a customer record. The middleware posts the receipt data to the ERP using the customer record ID. The middleware posts the sales order data to the ERP using the receipt and customer IDs. The sales order is now added to the queue for the warehouse team. The warehouse team prints a pick list and so on. So you go through these one by one. Now, so this is not a very simple example. I originally had this titled A Simple Example. It's not a simple example. There's a load of information buried inside in this. But by moving step by step, you can see various things that have to happen in order for a successful order here, in this case, to be posted from e-commerce into your ERP. And you can turn this then into a user acceptance testing test case at a later point. So when you're creating your list, it's useful to create a gap or requirements feature list and to run a Moscow analysis on it. It's a useful tool for making a summary list of all of the things you currently rely on that you must bring with you, and any new features you have to make a success of your replatforming project. Getting the level of granularity right is difficult. Often we see items that are basically table stakes for e-commerce, and things like my website should have a homepage and it should have a checkout, and we should be able to update SEO. These things are, again, they're table stakes, they're hygiene factors. You don't really need to collect those unless there's something specific you want to say about them. So they should just form part of the project. But on the other hand, having too many items in a list means that sometimes you end up with this kind of like a Santa Claus list, which is too long or ambitious for a project. So it's important to get your list, to work through your list and try and get as much as you can into it without overwhelming the actual project. And that's why the Moscow analysis is useful, and I'll go into that in a second. When you're making the list, I'd recommend that you make an effort to make a list of the things that you love about your existing platform. It's, like you may be moving from the platform, but there might be some really good things in it and things that you don't know yet that you can't live without. So making a list of the things that you love is a good idea. Like there's probably, like there might be a, Johnny in the warehouse who makes these pick lists from the e-commerce platform, or Jane in marketing who always uses the built-in blogging system. There are various stakeholders that are going to have things that they like about the platform. We need to collect that as a list as well, so that at a basic level, those can be marked off as they're going to come across. If you're looking to preserve the functionality, ideally, or you need to understand how the similar functionality is going to be achieved on the new platform and what the change will look like. So in any of these kinds of projects, change is a big word and it needs to be managed. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. When you're creating this list, I'd suggest that you also complete a Moscow analysis on each item to identify a priority and ideally remove some items that you do not need. So here we've got, this is very basic, but it's quite useful. You've got the feature, an announcement bar at the top of the website, the required functionality. In this case, we want the shipping motivator logic to be included in the announcement bar so that it says, you've only got 10 euros left to spend to get free shipping, something along those lines. You can agree whether it's in scope or not, and run a Moscow analysis. So the Moscow analysis, it's nothing, massively complex. It's basically setting a priority. Some items are must-have. You have to have them. You're not going to leave them behind. Some of them are should-have. So they're essential, but not vital. Some of them are could have. It'd be nice if you had them, but we're not going to focus on it in this current project necessarily. If it's in there, super. If not, no worries. And then the last one is will not have. These are the things that we're going to leave behind, or that we decide over the course of the requirements gathering and the discovery that we're going to just not do. So identifying what can or should be left behind. So not all functionality or features of your current e-commerce platform may be necessary or relevant in your new platform. And it's important to identify what can be left behind to avoid unnecessary complexity, cost, and to streamline the migration process. There's nothing worse than having a requirement, spending time getting that requirement onto the new e-commerce site, only to be told, well, actually, we don't really want that, or or it's not really needed. So it's important to kind of make a realistic analysis of the things you definitely have to have and the things that it would be nice, and so on. And you can analyze some of those things by consulting with stakeholders to determine which features are critical and which can be left behind. And sometimes it's useful. Even yesterday, I was on a call where we had somewhere in the region of 15 promotion types that were being requested. Only one of the promotion types really existed on the existing platform. The rest of them were all brand new. So it was even hard to agree how those promotions should be implemented. So what I asked was to know, okay, well, if we had a top, let's say 3 promotions or top 4 promotions after the ones that you have to preserve, that were there already, that the business is used to and the customers are used to, what other ones are, the top 3? And we focus on getting those across first. So, sometimes you got to make a list and say, in the old phrase, write a paragraph, cut out half the words, and then cut it in half again, to get as succinct as possible. It really helps with the rebuild project. User acceptance testing. So this is quite a critical part of a project, and it needs to be done in partnership with the agency and the business. It's not easy. It's not easy because it's hard to think with a testing head on to test things that, not only to test the thing that will happen when you follow the actual journey, but sometimes testing to understand what happens when something doesn't happen. So testing can be a little bit difficult, but at a very basic level, if you remember that list that we made back here, so this example journey, there's effectively a couple of things here that you would have to test. Have we created a customer record, and are we able to retrieve the customer ID to post in the receipt or transaction data? So those are tests that are easy enough to make. And then it's easy enough to understand that. So you just say, okay, have we done this? Have we done this? Has this worked? On the client side, so on your side, it'll be important for you to be sitting on the other side. And it's kind of like a push and pull type thing. We will, as an agency, let's say we build an integration, we will post over the data, and then you're sitting at the ERP and you're watching to see, does it arrive? And after it arrives, does it go down to warehousing? So do the things that we expect to happen? And that's really a kind of a partnership journey between the agency and the client. And you will need somebody who understands the systems, who can press all the buttons on your team, and who can report on any errors, accurately, because it's very easy as well when you've got problems, very easy to identify the wrong problem and try and fix the wrong problem. So that will be quite important, user acceptance testing side of things. And also, ideally, you would test it live before you go live. So, but if you can't, then it would be really important to rerun the UAT cases immediately after launch to ensure everything is working as expected and to catch any errors as early as possible. User acceptance testing takes a while in the project. It is well worth doing. And it also helps you as a client, to understand your new systems and how they operate, and to explain that to other people in the business. But once you do the user acceptance testing, even if you can't do it live, it'll be really fast to do it live once you've tried it a couple of times on, let's say, a sandbox environment or whatever. Then we have training. So in an ideal world, training should happen ahead of UAT, so that the team helping with the UAT would also be the team running the site. And that means that they get some hands-on experience with the platform while they're testing it. So let's say you get some training, then you do your user acceptance testing. With the user acceptance testing, you're going to be using the site, you're going to be creating new products and updating fields or posting orders or whatever. So you get kind of a hands-on experience with the site before you actually start to use it. it's very, very easy to fall into the trap of maybe only one person kind of roughly watching the project on the client team, and then going live and everybody trying to get up to speed almost immediately with this new platform that kind of some of them might not have even seen. So at least having at least one or two people who worked on the user acceptance testing can act as champions for the rest of the business and help to do some of the training and help to do some of the bedding in and help to do some of the error reporting as well back to the agency if there are errors. Whatever training you do get done, it's important to see if you can get it recorded so that you can share it later on, and also so that you can refer to it later, because with the best will in the world, it's very likely that you're going to forget a lot of what you've been trained on before you actually get to use it. So balancing the goals of the rebuild project with the new technology and features. I suppose one of the things I want to kind of call out here is to be careful of the words future-proof. When planning a platform migration, it's important to balance the main goals of the project. Yes, there will be, Harry Kelly, there will be a recording of the webinar available. It'll be sent to you afterwards. So it's important to balance the main goals of the rebuild project with the new technology and features that are available. And this can involve weighing the benefits of the new technology against the cost and complexity of the implementation, as well as ensuring that new features align with your business goals and objectives. This is where the kind of business goals, objectives, and targets comes in really, really useful. It's good to kind of refer to that. Sometimes there is there's definitely a temptation to say, okay, well, we want to use all of the promotion types. And then, you're working through those, you spend a lot of time understanding them, you test them and you see how it comes across into your order system, et cetera, et cetera. And then it turns out that actually you never really use those order types and you always rely on the 10% off orders, 10% off promotions, excuse me. So it's definitely worth balancing what you're trying to do with the things that you have in the new platform. I often hear companies worrying about not restricting themselves in the future. They want to future-proof, and they're looking to get everything implemented, all at once. And I would say that the time to worry about future-proofing is when you're selecting your platform. So this is earlier in the project. And you should kind of consider how far into the future is the future. Are we talking, 2 or 3 years? Are we talking 5 years? Because we're certainly not talking forever. And, if you're trying to plan for forever, it's an impossibility. So if you don't have a business requirement for a feature in the next 3 years, I would say it's not likely to be worth the worry for it now, because the platforms will change, they'll get updated, you'll have new roadmaps with new features coming down the line. So, when I'd recommend that you look to a platform that has good research and development team and a history of releasing new features against a roadmap. I would say that there should be on the platform, there should be a core team that is involved in research and development, and you're looking for a strong release history. So you're looking for a platform that has a history of releasing, ideally against a roadmap, but releasing on a continuous basis with new features. So, ask the simple question: what new features have been put on this platform in the last 12 months or in the last 18 months? After the core team within the e-commerce platform itself, you're looking towards the ecosystem of tech partners. Do the best of breed service providers integrate with the platform? So, if you think about best of breed email marketing platforms now, Klaviyo is probably on the tip of most people's tongues. After that, you're going to have maybe OmniSend, MailChimp, and so on. There are other platforms out there as well, obviously. But what you want to see as well, let's say Klaviyo is going to be the best of breed, and that's the one that we're going to use for email marketing. Do they integrate with this platform? And how many others integrate with the platform? Will it be easy for me to get services that integrate? And how let's say truly simple is the integration, and how deep is the integration? It might be the case that they integrate on a surface level, but they don't actually pull a lot of information from the new platform. So looking at the tech partners and the ecosystem of best of breed service partners will be important. And then finally, you've got the add-ons. So this is the ecosystem of, the App Store, basically. How many modules, apps, and add-ons are available if you want to, dip your toe in the water and try out, let's say, subscriptions, for example. Is there an app for that? Is there a service for that? So just because a platform has a feature, it doesn't mean it's worth planning for during your migration or replatform project. For example, Shopify has built-in internationalization and it has B2B features. But if you don't sell outside of Ireland and you don't plan to in the next 2 or 3 years, or if you don't plan on selling business to business in the next 3 years, then trying to include this in your project in order to future-proof yourself is likely to be a waste of time and money. In particular, if you're not going to turn it on in the next year or so, by the time you actually come to turn it on, it's likely to have changed at worst, or at best, it will need so much kind of dusting off of the project that you may as well have waited to implement it when you needed it. The bottom line, I suppose, with some of these features is all of the features are going to cost you to implement. So if you're not going to get a return on investment from the item, from a particular item, because you're not going to implement it within a year or a year and a half, 2 years, then it's probably worth waiting until later on. You can always have a phase two. Another thing to keep in mind is your own timelines and your business timelines. This year is going to be taken up with your migration or your replatforming. And the development of any immediately required features. That's going to take the bones of, 12 to 18 months before everything is done, bedded in, etc. You're going to be doing well to get that far. So there's going to be a lot of disruption in the business. So, there's no point in trying to future-proof everything. So your feature list and your Moscow analysis will help you there. On the same note, I would say it's important to keep your eyes on the prize. The prize is a successful migration that hits its targets and leaves nothing behind. That's the number one goal when you're migrating. If you migrate your website and you successfully build in a whole heap of features, but the actual website doesn't sell well, the conversion rate is poor, your customer journeys aren't what you were hoping for, then it probably wasn't worth doing. There's no point in taking, let's say, compromising on the things, your basics, the functionality that you absolutely need to have in order to get a whole heap of other things that you may or may not use. So the eye on the prize is the successful migration. That's going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to do. Then the successful implementation and adoption of all of the new required features. And adoption there is really, really important. There's going to be a lot of change management in what you're doing, and getting those new required features over the line within the process, within the team is going to take a little bit of time. And on that, in terms of preparing yourself for change management, you're going to have change and people are not going to like it. Where there's change, there are people, shaking their heads. So as a business, it's your responsibility to prepare your team and all your stakeholders for this change. The larger the business, the larger the impact even the smallest change will make. We've seen it so frequently. What seems to be a very minor change from the e-commerce business point of view has ripple effects that seem to cause panic in the accounts department or in the marketing department or in the buying department. So it's very important to try and identify where change is likely to happen and identify what is different about the new ways of doing things, and identify who needs to know, which stakeholders are involved in this particular piece of change, and involve them in the change as early as possible, and ideally get their feedback. In an ideal world, anybody that you say you're going to make a change to their way of working or their day-to-day work, they're not going to be happy with you. But if you can explain why it's important to do it, what the urgency is, and then take on board their feedback and say, okay, well, look, what would you like us to do here? How would you like to see this happening? Maybe you can add in an automation or a new change, something new in it that makes their lives a little bit easier. They'll become a champion for the change, and it's a really powerful thing in a business when you get people who are typically, let's say, naysayers, starting to nod their heads and saying that this new e-commerce platform is going to be great. So it's really important to try and bring those people on board and manage the change. In terms of project build timelines, so a project build will typically take no shorter than 6 months. It's typical. It's going to take longer than you think is also typical. And a best case scenario where everybody is ready and understood and everything is understood, it might take 4 months. So this here is a lift and shift project timeline for a project that we completed last year. We did scoping and discovery in March. It was really, really fast because we already knew the site and our client knew what they wanted. And we were able to get that all completed and over the line within 4 weeks. That part usually takes 6 to 10 weeks approximately. Then the build phase was really fast. There is no design phase in here because we did a lift and shift. So all we had to do was shift the front end from one site into the new site, complete the integration work, complete the migration work, do the user acceptance testing. As you can see here, that took, let's say, 8 weeks in this case. And that happens from as soon as we have something migrated onto the site and the customer is looking at it and saying, you know, you forgot the such and such a product attribute, or our images didn't all arrive over, or you know, that sort of thing, all the way through the integration piece and testing that the orders have arrived and all of that, then into go live preparation and launch. So that's about as fast as you can possibly make it, and that's without a design, with us knowing everything, and everything was well completed. We had a very good project manager, or sorry, e-commerce manager on the other side. Then a kind of a more typical timeline. This is one where we had there were some delays in the project, and you know, so you can see here it took quite a bit longer. It took about 10 months. We had the discovery phase, which happened over Christmas, so that took a little bit of time. Then we had the design phase in here, so we can see ideation and design, and we had 3 weeks of delay where basically we were just waiting for design changes to be requested and things like that. We got design sign off, and then we had delivery, front end, QA and bug fixes, the data migration, EPOS and ERP, EPOS migration or EPOS integration, the client UAT, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a more typical timeline, and that would usually take somewhere in the region of, let's say, 6 to 10 months maximum. So it's important to kind of be realistic about your timelines. Just because it can take 6 months doesn't mean you should only give yourself 6 months. If it's going to take 6 months, then, you know, give yourself 7 months if you can. I know it's a bit ideal, but you know, that would be very, very useful. It's important to realize as well, or to remember that, you know, and being completely frank about it, most of the delays will happen client side, because, you know, you as a business only do a re-platform maybe once every 3 to 6 years, so you don't have a lot of experience in what is going to go wrong, what can happen, and the resourcing that you have to do in terms of getting information and content and data over to the agency. And on that note, in terms of staffing and resources, you know, you've got to identify who the stakeholders are, in particular who is going to be the final sign-off on the whole project. We need a project owner who's going to give us sign-off, who's going to own the project from the client perspective. You need to involve marketing, because I'll have a lot to say about it. Ideally, you would involve buying if you can. You're going to need data management and input resources, so somebody on your team is going to manage that data side of things, and you need somebody in snagging and user acceptance testing. In terms of when to launch, in a very ideal world, you would launch 3 months before any mission critical period. Obviously, that's easier said than done. Black Friday nowadays takes up most of the end of the year. You know, the Black Friday lead can start as early as the start of October nowadays. Also, you might have specific sector-specific peaks, like, you know, summer sales, home and garden furniture sales at the moment, back to school type sales in the end of August and September. So in practice, it's very difficult to kind of find a point when you have 3 months. But at the very least, you should give yourself 6 weeks after launch before the start of any major sales period. And also try to arrange your schedule so you have some wriggle room. In terms of planning for your launch day, so items to keep in mind: somebody will have to access domain name records and update them. You know, it's not really funny how often that's forgotten about. So we generally try to find out who has the access to the domain name records at the start of a project. You'll typically be doing final data migrations, so you want to know what data migrations you need to do on the day and whether a data freeze is necessary before that, like not freezing product data, for example, and so on. You'll have to notify customers. And how are you going to do that and when to do it? We would recommend that you do it about a week, half a week to a week after you launch, so that the site is bedded in, and then you notify the customers. You will probably have to notify them to give them their new passwords. And then you will also have to think about the backup and winding down of your old platform. It's also funny how often that's forgotten about. You might need to access it to process old orders. You know, at the very least, you might want to keep a backup of it. So how are you going to be able to access your old platform when the new platform launches? So it's kind of important to keep an eye on. Then, and so I'm just coming up towards the end here. This is second last slide. After launch, what do you need to keep an eye on? So you should conduct thorough testing. Before making the new site live, it's essential to test as far as you can. But once the site has gone live, you'll probably need to rerun a lot of those tests. Some of the tests are only going to be valid when the site goes live, such as site performance, product search and navigation, and things like that. Ensuring that you do some testing after the site goes live will help to give your customers a smooth, hassle-free shopping experience. Expect things to go wrong. There won't be major things going wrong, but as you know yourself, anything that goes wrong with an e-commerce site when it's live is kind of mission critical. So be prepared for it. It's important to redirect your traffic, obviously. So if you're upgrading or replatforming an existing site, you'll need to take care of 301 redirects, ensuring that customers who have bookmarked or saved links to the old site will automatically be redirected to a new site. But also, obviously, for search engine optimization, you need to tell Google that if there are new URLs for pages that they may have in their index. You should monitor site performance. Some of these go without saying, but it's worth saying them. Once the site is live, it's important to monitor site performance closely, monitoring site speed, server uptime if you have a server, user behavior. You're going to see dips, and especially when you're looking, let's say, from one day to the next, you're going to see things change, and like it might get worrying. But you just keep an eye on it over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. In particular, for example, your search engine optimization side of things, you should be keeping an eye on that for maybe 2 months, very closely after site launch. You'll need to communicate with your customers. It's essential to tell them about the changes to the e-commerce site. Ideally, make a big deal out of it. Send out an email blast, post updates on social media, etc. And also consider whether or not you need to let people know about password changes and things like that. And finally, you should also go and evaluate success, and ideally evaluate the success of the project with your agency and give them feedback. So once the site is live, after a few weeks or a few months, it's important to look at those benchmarks and those results that you were trying to hit and see if you're moving in that direction. And finally, after launch, we get into what we like to call partnership and success. So ongoing operations, mini projects, phase 2, etc. Once the site is launched, if you have a successful launch, typically you've forgotten about it within a month, and it's time to move to the future. So, and that's where things can often really start to take off. So that's everything. I would be, thank you very much for your time. You can get me on ger@studio49.com or info@studio49.com. And I would be really happy to take any questions at this stage. So if you want to ask a question, we can take it by voice. If you just raise your hand, and otherwise just add a question into the Q&A. So the first question there is, does Studio 49 have experience in finalizing a complex lift and shift that has already been commenced? Would you have a phased launching B2B platform prior to D2C? So to the first question, finalizing a complex lift and shift that has already started, I don't think so is the answer. I can't think of one offhand. We've definitely been involved in quite a few projects that were effectively, let's say, rescue projects. We're happy to look at those. But depending on the reasons why your lift and shift is stalled, if it's supposed to be quick enough, you'd have to kind of look at that, and we'd be happy to look at it with you. So the second question is, would you advise a phased launch, in particular launching B2B platforms prior to a D2C site? My opinion is, if you already have it all, you should be trying to move all of it. So if you already have a B2B with a D2C site, you should be moving the whole lot together. It's very hard to operate a phased launch when things are already in place and are already being used. It's easier to do, let's say, the non-phased version of it if you already have it. So if you already know what your B2B looks like in your existing platform, and that's what you want to move across, or if you already know what your D2C side of the business looks like, it's very easy to describe that. It's much easier for an agency to kind of to identify all of the parts of it and move it all at the same time. It will take longer. So if timeline is an issue, that might come into it. But you should be able to test everything at the same time. If you haven't done B2B yet, or you haven't done the D2C side of things yet, and you're starting one of those afresh, it would probably be easier to do it as a phased approach, because all of your attention is going to be sucked up in one of the areas that you don't know yet. So let's say you have a let's say you've got a D2C site that you currently operate, and you want to move. I would move the D2C site first, make sure that's all working, and then move the B2B side of things. But it's horses for courses for all of those sorts of things. So I hope that one helped. The next question is what to look for in an ePOS or ERP that would complement Shopify, and the Shopify POS a good option. So the question in terms of Shopify POS, it's an improving platform. In Ireland, I know of a couple of companies that use it. Probably most well-known one would be Gym Plus Coffee, but there are a couple of fashion retailers who use Shopify in, let's say, in up to 6 or 8 stores. I think 6 or 8 stores is the biggest install base that I know of for Shopify POS. Let's say, is it a good option? I mean, we've installed it in boutique stores. If you've got one shop and you're looking to switch POS, I would definitely recommend Shopify POS. We've put it in a couple of stores and we've never heard anybody complain about it. It's only when you're used to using your ePOS for a lot of other functionality like shelf edge printing or reporting or tools like that you might need to just do a little bit of more of a deep dive on it. But certainly if you've got 1 or 2 stores, or if you're considering pop-ups and things like that, Shopify POS is a great option. And it's also cheap, so you can dip your toe in the water pretty easily. And of course, it's totally integrated with Shopify. And of course, you can also integrate things like gift cards and loyalty systems and things like that. And it will reduce your costs enormously. In terms of an ePOS or ERP that would complement Shopify, again, there's horses for courses there. The main thing, I suppose, is when you ask if they have a connector already in place, and ask if the connector is does it connect directly into Shopify via the Shopify API, and ask how many orders and how frequently it updates inventory and how much inventory it can update at one time, whether it creates the products, whether you have to create the product, whether it updates products, and that sort of thing. So in terms of an ePOS or ERP that would complement Shopify, firstly, does it have a connector to Shopify? If it does have a connector to Shopify, how many products will it handle, and how many product updates, how many inventory updates does it handle? And an important thing there, for example, we have a client who has they have about 20 stores around the country, and they have about 200,000 products. So 200,000 SKUs by 20 stores is a huge amount of inventory to update on a daily basis, or to manage across all of those locations. And you can only really do that if you've engineered the integration to Shopify very, very well. So we have a middleware. Our middleware integrates to Shopify. We've done a lot of engineering on our middleware, and we connect the middleware then to the ePOS or ERP system. But that's a custom integration. It can be expensive. So to answer your question, does it have a connector? How much data does it handle? Does it update frequently enough for you? Does it do order processing, refunds, returns, how you do cancellations, and that sort of thing? That answers that question. Then from Marcus, what stage should a port over factor in compliances like GDPR, accessibility, and lay the groundwork for SEO? So that's the first question. And then the second question, if a rebrand is happening, how complete should this be prior to moving into a replatforming a new build? So that's Marcus from Clean Canvas. So the first question there, what stage should a port over factor in compliances like GDPR, accessibility, and lay the groundwork for SEO? GDPR, you need to make sure that you're happy with the GDPR compliance of the platform when you're selecting the platform. So at the very, very start, in your RFP, you need to when you're selecting the platform, you're making a decision about the platform, you need to make sure that you're happy with the GDPR side of things. So you know, in Europe, you have to comply with GDPR, and it's your non-negotiable, and also you can't contract away your responsibility for complying with GDPR. So you can't say, well, I didn't know, or, you know, it's not my fault, kind of a thing. If you have a breach, or if there's a problem with GDPR, you as a business are the one who's going to be found negligible. You can't kind of say, well, actually it was the platform. It was your responsibility to make sure that the platform wasn't going to be a problem. So GDPR needs to be taken care of from the start. The accessibility side of things, assuming that you mean like being able to change the font size for legibility, or people with color blindness, or people who can't hear. At the moment in Ireland, it's not as big a deal as you'd expect. You know, I think you'd have to start, if accessibility was important to you, you would have to start with accessibility from the pretty much at the outset. When you're doing the theme development, you have to know like what the different colors, or what different types of you know, color blindness you're going to cater for, or are you going to cater for people who have hearing issues and need the website read to them. In the United States, I know for the last 2 or 3 years, there have been a lot of kind of like slip and trip brigades taking people to court over poorly sites that are not as accessible as they should be. That hasn't happened, thankfully, here yet. To be completely honest, it's rare to hear people asking for having specific requirements around accessibility. But if you do, you need to talk about them at the start. Laying the groundwork for SEO, that needs to be done in the middle of during the project, at the data migration stage. So what are we going to move over that is important and critical for SEO, especially content, and how are we going to handle the URL redirects, and how are we going to handle the fact that the URLs are probably going to shift. So you take care of that in the middle of let's say the discovery phase and during the middle of the project. So that's the groundwork. It would be important to do a benchmark on SEO, you know, using maybe a tool like Screaming Frog or something, and do a comparison then after you go live, to make sure that, especially that you haven't left things like you haven't done, to make sure you have done correct 301 redirects, and resubmitted sitemaps, and that the new sitemaps are working, and things like that. In the rebrand, how complete should that be prior to moving into a replatforming and new build? So the rebrand side of things, how complete should it be? Like, I mean, you would have to do it during the design phase. So if the rebrand isn't complete, your goal should be to complete it during the design phase. It would be a disaster to do the design of the website and then produce a rebrand just after you do the design. Even if you're in the middle of the project, that would be a disaster. Like, there are so many things that the brand, the tone of voice, the shapes that you use in your branding, and all of that, that they communicate to the customer in terms of your brand proposition through the design of the website. You know, fonts, colors, photography, all of that sort of thing has to be taken into account. And it's really, I think really you need to have that finished before the design ideation phase, or you are completing it during the design ideation phase, but you're not exiting the design ideation phase before having your rebrand completed. That's what I would say there. So I think I have answered all of the questions. Thanks so much. We've most of the attendees still on board, so thanks a million for sticking with me, guys. Really appreciate it. If anybody has any last final question, I am happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you again. The slides will be sent out to everybody. You have my email address if you have anything that you want to complete. Thanks very much, Janice. Yeah, thanks again. And I hope to talk to you soon. Take care.